Have you ever downloaded a PNG of black cinematic bars and placed it on your footage to make it seem like your footage is anamorphic? If you've done that, you don't need to do that anymore. Let's talk about the Sirui 40mm T1.8 Autofocus Anamorphic lens here today. So this lens is coming in at a price point of $699. It's currently $100 off. You can check the links and get that discount for yourself. Now this lens covers the Super 35 format. Its aperture is a range of T1.8 all the way to T22. You can select which flare option you want as well. You can get just a neutral streak, or you can get a blue streak flaring. And in this case, I do report that the flaring, at least in the instances that I was shooting, it wasn't overly strong. And that's something that I personally would prefer. I'm not looking for that sci-fi super strong, blue streak, massive, intense flares going on. You could probably get that if you were more direct with your light source into the lens itself, but just in real world cases, in real world scenarios, those flares were there, but they weren't overbearingly strong, which is something that I enjoyed about it. Now, this lens has a 1.33 squeeze ratio, which is super easy depending on your editing program. Personally, I'm in DaVinci Resolve. If you just right click on your clip, go down into clip attributes, and you can select 1.33 times for the pixel ratio, and that's going to de-squeeze your footage in DaVinci Resolve. Now, on the front of the lens, we're looking at a 77mm filter thread. And this lens only weighs 1.4 pounds, so it's not, overbearingly heavy. It's a medium-sized lens, not large, not small, but it's not super heavy, which is certainly appreciated. And it has weather sealing on the back, as well as a USB-C port for future firmware upgrades. Now, overall, the quality, the build of this lens, I think is really, really nice. It's made to a high standard. Now, the aperture ring comes with a toggle to click or de-click, whatever mode of operation that you would prefer. You can have your choice there. And the aperture ring, it doesn't possess like a hard stop at the end in between F20 or T22 and automatic, but it does possess enough of like a hard click in order to let you know that, okay, I'm not gonna power through this kind of light stop. It has a light stop. So it's enough where you're not going to turn and rotate through it accidentally, but not enough where you're locked in between T1.8 and T22. There's no lock-in feature. It does just roll over right through, but there's enough of a stop there where you're gonna notice it and not accidentally bump over to automatic aperture. Now, the focus ring, its damping is on the lighter side, I would say, of things. When it comes to its rotation, it's very smooth, it's great to rotate. But I think personally, and this is personal opinion, right? You may disagree and you may differ here, but personally, I would prefer the focus ring to have just slightly heavier damping, because I find that it's easier to make accurate focus throws and focus rotations with a little bit of a heavier damped feeling. And so if in this particular case, if the focus ring was damped more like the aperture ring is, then maybe I wouldn't even say anything at all, but it is a lighter rotation all the way around. And something that definitely a certain crowd of users are not going to enjoy is that the focus ring goes all the way around, 360 degrees of rotation. There is no focus distances on the side of the lens integrated into the focus ring to show you, this is the distance marker, this is 1 meter of focus, this is 2 meters of focus. There's no distance markings on this lens, which I think certainly a certain group of users are going to not necessarily enjoy, but for me, it doesn't really matter, because for me, what I'm looking at this anamorphic lens for is its autofocus use. So, that may throw you off that doesn't have distance markings, that may not. It depends, I think, what you're using your lenses for, what you tend to work on for your projects. So I'm here for the automatic focus, which I really enjoyed. But I think there is a certain number of users that are going to say, hey, we would like distance markings on there. So this being, of course, an autofocus anamorphic lens, you can switch between manual and autofocus modes. And if you prefer the manual mode, then the focus ring is geared if you want to use follow focus gearing in your operation of this lens. So let's talk about autofocus. This is, an autofocus anamorphic lens, like one of the first of its kinds. And I can say that autofocus is good and it's reliable. Now, on my particular Sony camera, because this is an anamorphic lens, the image is going to be squeezed a little bit on your screen. All right, so because the squeeze ratio is 1.33 times, the image is going to be warped, but it's not warped to such an extreme extent where I look at my screen, which I'm looking at right now, and I say, oh, I can't even, I can't even frame this. I can't even find focus. Like it's too tough. And if I wanted to touch to focus, then it's like I can't select it. None of those problems exist. 1.33 times squeeze ratio on your camera's screen is not impossible to operate. So it's not that you need to buy this lens and then you need to buy a viewing monitor to de-squeeze the image and see what you're really working with. For me, I can throw this lens on, I can look at my screen, I can touch to focus. It's no problem at all operating autofocus with this anamorphic lens on my particular Sony body, which cannot de-squeeze it in the actual viewing monitor itself. I had no problem with any of that, with composing the shot or selecting the subject that I was trying to focus on. I was impressed with the lens's capabilities in low lights situations as well, both grabbing and holding focus, as well as just providing a nice clean image. Now, as far as focus breathing goes, there is focus breathing present on this lens, although I wouldn't report that it's overly so where it's destructive to any type of storytelling, or it's destructive to where it's pulling your viewer's attention away from what you're trying to focus on and being like, why is my whole screen moving right now? Focus breathing is present, but it's certainly not awful. Now, chromatic aberration is looking through the footage, especially I would say chromatic aberration is definitely visible whenever we did like our test, our focus pulling test, having it wide open at T1.8. Chromatic aberration was definitely there and it was decently strong. However, taking this lens out into real world situations, into real world usage, looking through the footage, I'm not seeing that the footage is plagued by chromatic aberrations in any way. The real world footage to me looks to be pretty clean, and it's not an issue that you have to constantly worry about. Now, of course, if you're going to open it all the way up to T1.8 and you're in a very strong, high contrasty lighting situation, then yes, of course, you need to be careful. But in this particular situation, we're sitting at f2, and we're probably not noticing an abundance of chromatic aberrations. And certainly out in the real world, going out, using the lens for whatever you normally use it, I didn't run into a bunch of problems where it's like, oh my word, all my footage is ruined. And on all the tree branches, we're getting color fringing and all that kind of stuff. No, chromatic aberration is present. You do have to be careful in strong situations. However, it definitely doesn't plague the footage. Now, something we do need to discuss is this lens covers the Super 35 format. And so while it covers the Super 35 format, I think it's also completely usable in full frame mode. What you're looking at right here is full frame mode. And you will notice that there's not, massive vignetting up in the corners. Now, does vignetting occur? Yeah, it does. There's, here's an example of vignetting up in the corners, but I don't think that particularly on this 40mm version of their anamorphic lens that you have to crop into APS-C mode to make this lens usable. I think you can shoot it in full frame and you'll get a little bit of vignetting, but it's not destructive, it's not distracting, it's a little bit present, but overall it's really not something that's going to draw your eye or catch or take your attention away. And so, in conclusion, while this lens is perhaps missing some features that the hardcore cinematic community would more so demand, while it may be missing some certain characteristics that more hardcore cinematic community is really vocal about, I think that this lens is something to be really excited about. Because for all of us solo content creators who have been dreaming about wanting to use an anamorphic lens, but not wanting to have it be manual focus, wanting to have it autofocus because we're setting it up to shoot ourselves and we're not trying to tinker with the focus field and all that kind of stuff. For us, I think this lens is really quite an incredible tool. I think the build quality is absolutely fantastic. It's incredibly high tier, and I think that this lens is going to be incredibly useful for solo content creators who are working by themselves to get nice cinematic anamorphic footage with autofocus there to help them. And additionally, I also want to throw in, you can get really experimental in taking this lens out and taking photos with it, using it almost as like an X-Pan camera where you're getting these really nice wide kind of panoramic images. Go and have fun with it in photo mode as well. And so, yes, I think there's some things that could potentially be improved on, but I think that as a starting point for autofocus anamorphic lenses, this is very affordable, and I think it's something to get really excited about. And I hope, and I certainly would try and encourage Sirui and other lens manufacturers to keep going down this road. I love where we're at. I love the beginning. I love the starting point that we're seeing. Continue to go down it and give us great autofocus anamorphic products. I am absolutely here for it. If you are as well, if you are interested in this lens, then the purchasing links are down below. Other than that, I hope you have a wonderful day. Take care, and remember to let the light in.